Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Wednesday edition of the Expendable Show. I am your host, The Expendable. So there's some stuff going on this week, as there is every week. I could do this every day, probably. But first, I did a podcast a little while ago about TikTok and like some of the social media platforms. I kind of stuck up for TikTok a little bit, and I want to retract that because I just recently watched like a whole series of like TikTok videos where um, people are getting on there and they're getting like paid like hot dogs and ice cream cones and stuff. And they're like, the people are going yum, 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 yum. And like people just keep doing this over and over and over again. And I'm watching these people and then they're doing it in VR. So I saw another video where these two guys were doing it like in front of this like street like shopping center, and they're like staring in like they're looking in the windows, but they got their little VR goggles on. And so they're sitting here, they're doing all these things, they're like eating hot dogs, and it's like, well, do you see how stupid you look? But um these people are making big bucks off of this. I don't get it, but so I'm retracting my statement that TikTok might be harmless. TikTok's extremely harmless. I lost probably at least 60 IQ points just watching those videos of the stupidity that people will do to get likes and virtual ice cream and hot dogs and tacos and whatever the hell else they were eating. So I was completely appalled and blown back by what I was watching. But with that said, I also yesterday I made a YouTube short that was basically me holding my new kitty, Moscow. My cat's name's Moscow, and I said Joe Biden hates kitties. That's all I said, and then I published it, and within a half, probably an hour, I think I went and checked it again. I had like almost 40 views. I was like, man, like you do stupid things on the internet. Like all I did was have a cat and I was holding a cat. I said Joe Biden hates kitties. And like beep, 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 people start watching it. But I put something serious with some real information on, you don't get as many hits that quick. It takes time for like real information to circulate. So it just kind of gives me a perspective of what people are clicking on out there. But anyway, let's get to some real topics. I'm going to kind of split this up into two different subjects today. First, I want to go over the progressions of the Hamas pro-Palestinian protest. Things have escalated in certain situations. UCLA was pretty much in a full riot over the weekend, I believe, and they were fighting each other. The police were not cleared to go in and clear it out, so it was like a free for all. Like it looked like something off of a movie, like a giant like riot off of a movie. So there's a lot of issues with that. For one, you got people out there they're not safe. The UCLA's president isn't. Nobody's doing anything. And so what's it going to take? We're going to have another Kent State situation where someone gets shot before, people do anything. UCLA is like right by like a bunch of residential areas, and some of them are very wealthy, like high-end residential areas. So the public has easy access to the university. So that means like shitheads have easy access to the university. So we need to like think about that. Like how safe is this? It's not. So, the peaceful protests have now turned violent. They're starting to kind of what I would say that, it's turning up at some of the other ones. This is going to get worse before it gets better. We have a president in the White House that refuses to acknowledge it. Karine Jean-Pierre was on, which for those of you who don't know, she's the press secretary for Joe Biden. She refuses to even comment on it. She says the White House we've condemned anti-Semite lingo, but she won't tell the protesters to go home. It's the same thing as what what they were saying about Donald Trump at January 6th. You got all these people there. They're like, well, the president could have said, everybody go home, but he didn't. Joe Biden can do the same thing. He has that power. I don't understand, but what it does is it'll expose him. He won't do it because it exposes him to go anti-Palestinian, and that's going to cause him to lose even more voters than what he already is. And he's already lost the Palestinian vote. So, anybody from the Middle East is not voting for Joe Biden. He's already screwed that up. Because what people don't realize is you can't buy a Muslim vote. Their faith, and they're very devout people. Nothing matters more to them than their faith. So when you cross that line, like Joe Biden did, he's just sent that big package overseas where Ukraine got a bunch of money, and Israel got some, and so did Gaza, the Palestinians. But what people don't remember is that Hamas is the governing body of Gaza, of the Palestinians. So you think the Palestinians got that money? No, Gaza did. So that's going to piss Israel off, because they're going to go, well, you guys are stupid. You just gave the bad guys money. And then the Hamas people are going to be like, well, okay, I guess they're rearming, so we're going to have to rearm. This doesn't solve anything. And then he gets on TV. Biden's on TV today saying we're in high hopes of a peace treaty. You just refunded both sides to buy more arms, you idiot. There's not going to be a peace treaty now. A peace treaty long enough to regroup. That's what's going to happen. And this president just don't get it. Or it's by design. Do they really want these two groups to fight? And I think it's stupid. And then you have open society foundations in there funding the Palestinian protesters. So this is a problem where a lot of people and a lot of outside spectators are coming into this that they just don't need to be in there, but nobody wants to boot them out. When you look at the footage of UCLA, you see there's one lady on there that was teaching these protesters how to block off doors and where they strategically need to be placed, and and this lady was like probably 60 years old. Supposedly her face has popped up at a lot of different places throughout the last 4 years of protesting at places. So, we'll get into that a little bit later, but I'm going to go through and we're going to talk about some of these colleges and universities that are just allowing this to happen. If it was my college, like, you don't see this stuff happening up at like Hillsdale College. You don't see this stuff happening at Ohio Northern University. You don't see this stuff happening. It's not, because they don't play. They're not going to play that. These kids, how long have they been out in their courtyards and everything protesting? I would pull every single one of the funding for these kids. Like, any federal funding, done. Any scholarships these kids got, done. Get your ass back to class. Like, if you're on federal funds, get your ass to class, because that's my money paying for you. Go to class. Like, get out of the streets, man. You're in a real person situation, being some stupid college kids. And when somebody gets killed, you're all going to sit around and go, "Oh, how did this happen?" Because you guys are idiots. You're playing adult games that you got no business being in. Go put your nose in a book and read it. That's what you're there for. But anyway, UCLA was the biggest one. They're the ones acting out the most. There was a lot of major fighting going on between two groups. I couldn't really tell who was who. It didn't even look like there was any Israeli people there. There could have been, but it looked like Antifa fighting Hamas. That's what it looked like. I don't know if that's what it was, but when I'm watching the videos, that everybody's masked up and hooded up, and it is a whole thing. You got people hitting people with boards, and it was nuts. No cops. It should be seen as a riot. It was seen as a riot. CNN, them, they don't really report nothing. They just show them out picking flowers or something. But there were also many, 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 many paid agitators in there. You could definitely tell some of those people. And when you go through the statistics of all these colleges, you start to see when you read about them that over half of the people that get arrested are non-students. They're just people that are there. Why are they there? Well, because they're paid to be there. They're paid to try to get these college kids to act out. And luckily, like some of the schools that are fighting this, they're arresting the shitheads and getting them out of there. So you have paid agitators. Open Society Foundation's got their money all over this stuff. You're stupid if you think that it's not. Every time something divisive happens in this country, you can pretty much go back and you can see where Open Society Foundation has funded it somehow. They continually divert money. For those of you who don't know, Open Society Foundation is a nonprofit organization founded by George Soros, handed down to his son Alex Soros, who is a shitbag. He is what was his quote? I will eradicate MAGA from the planet. That was one of his quotes. Good luck with that, because you look like you're soft as Charmin, and I just don't believe that you have the cojones to really, attack MAGA, you idiot. Anyway, then you go down to like Columbia. That's where all this originated from, and now Columbia is not allowing press access on their campus. Wonder why. Also, I actually think that the press should stop covering it, because as long as these stupid kids keep seeing their protests on Fox News and CNN, MSNBC, it fuels them to keep going because it makes them feel like they're winning. If the news would just stop reporting it, then and they know the world's not seeing their anger, they're probably going to quit, because then it's all for nothing. So Columbia's in on that. New York Mayor Adams has already come out and said that there are outside agitators in there, and he is not putting up with it. So I look to see what happens with that. Columbia did allow the NYPD to go in there and clear out that corridor, but then they came right back after the NYPD left for a little bit. At NYU, 170 were arrested. George Washington University is involved. You have University of Texas at Austin involved, where over 150 protesters were arrested. Around half of them were paid agitators. So you have all these agitators in here getting arrested. Just in those two schools alone, it's over 320 people have been arrested. And now the numbers are getting up there. So just to name some more, Cal State Poly, Tulane, Virginia Commonwealth, the University of Minnesota, USC, Emerson College, The Ohio State University, Emory here in Atlanta. So there's a video going around on Facebook, which I shared it, and it's on my Facebook page, but it's the NFL draft, and it says the Atlanta Falcons select Georgia State Trooper, and then it's a video of a Georgia State Trooper taking off and tackling a protest out at Emory. But I've seen that video like several times floating around out there. It's actually pretty funny. But like, and that's when you look at the what's going on at Emory, the Atlanta PD don't play. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that right now. Every time Atlanta PD gets involved into something bad, bad things happen. So if you're out at Emory and you're doing something stupid, expect Atlanta PD to dunk you on your shit, because it's gonna happen. University of Wisconsin is on the list. Indiana University, IU, Arizona State, Northeastern University, Washington University at St. Louis, which is ironic because at that protest, Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein was arrested for, trespassing. So, we should probably bring that up with Joe Biden, that there's a a president running that just committed a crime, since he's really big on presidents that commit crimes. University of North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Johns Hopkins. There's over 1,000 arrests now. Over 1,000. That's a lot of kids. I mean, it's some of these schools are really, really big. 50, Ohio State's got over 50,000 students on campus. I believe last time I looked. So you're looking at, out of probably hundreds of thousands of students, 1,000 have been arrested. That's 1%. If it's 100,000 total. So that's not good. We got a lot of kids out there getting arrested, so it's going to hurt. I wouldn't hire if somebody came and I saw that they were arrested at Emory for protesting. I'm not hiring them, mainly because if you don't agree with me, are you going to bring a bunch of Palestinian protesters out front of my business? No, not hiring you. Sorry, Jack. Down the road you go. So these kids, they don't realize how stupid of a decision they're making. I'm not anti-protest. I think it's stupid, but I believe in the United States Constitution. So the United States Constitution says that you have the right to peacefully protest. For one, I hope everybody's got their permits and they're in their allotted permitted areas, that you know how the process works. I'll guarantee you that hasn't happened. So they all should be trespassing, bam, right off the bat. For two, you should be allowed to protest. However, as soon as it gets violent, shut it down. You can't allow it to continue. UCLA should have no kids on their foyer right now. Everybody should be arrested that's out there. Arrest them all. I don't understand that. So I think Columbia said, well, we've suspended several students and we will be considering expulsion. Considering expulsion, but they made your university look stupid. Pretty soon, donors are going to stop donating. Expel the shitheads. Like, nobody says that this prestigious Ivy League school has to take in shitheads. If you want to misbehave on college campus, get out. It's really that easy. It's really that easy. But this fits the far left's agenda right now. So Joe Biden's kind of, whoa, I'm gonna look over here. Let's talk about legalizing marijuana today, which is what he did instead of talking about telling a bunch of college kids to get up off their asses and go back to school. So Biden won't take a stand. Naturally, he's the biggest coward that's ever been president. He lets people barely old enough to vote in Congress tell him what to do, like a soft ass. I think that the way UCLA was done, and I'm sure that if I was to really go dig into some of the video footage, I'll find it at other college campuses, probably NYU and Columbia as well. As soon as the paid agitators get in there and these protests get violent, in my opinion, it fits the RICO statute. I think they should RICO charge everybody and let them all rat on each other. Like, who's funding who? Let's get it out in the open. Who's part of the university? Who's not part of the university? Just RICO charge everybody, because eventually people are going to start ratting. And that's what that's basically how police works now. You just nab some people up and let them rat on each other. So that's something that I would look at if I was a prosecutor in some of these cities. I would just bust out the RICO charge, or I would say, hey, one violent thing happens and the RICO charges are coming out. And I'll guarantee you that'll knock down the majority of the protesters, probably send a lot of people home, because RICO charges ain't something to play with. So with that said, we're going to go into the last 10 minutes. And this is not going to be a popular, ideal, but I've studied this for a very, very long time. And I have, briefly wrote about it in my first book that I have right here, From the Mouth, by me, my mouth that never stopped running. Ask everyone who knows me, I never shut up. But anyway, so when we look at RICO charges, and then we go over here and say, okay, what's RICO charges normally used for except for Donald Trump? Okay, well, organized crime. What is organized crime? Organized crime is I don't consider the Bloods and the Crips organized crime. I think that they're very disorganized. I think at one time that they were very organized, but I think over the years, as the generations have squandered the gangs away, that I believe that they're not as organized as their founders had created them. However, I do believe that organized crime, especially amongst some of the other groups, maybe the Italian mafia, the Irish mafia, the Russian mafia, some of those groups I believe are a necessary evil. I don't like the violence. However, when we look at the cities of the past that have had organized crime, what does, when you have organized crime, let's say New York City. We have New York City, and back in the 90s, the 20s, all the way up to the 90s, you had organized crime. You had the Italian mafia was the biggest group. Okay, so you had the five families. Those families did not listen to anybody except for themselves. So they were considered uncontrollable. However, La Cosa Nostra provided a set of rules. So there were rules and bylaws that they had to follow. Okay, so that did create a sense of control. You know, one of them was you were not supposed to murder law enforcement. What that does is when you have these groups and they're running their rackets, if you don't kill law enforcement, they're probably going to leave you alone and let you do your racket. Okay, because what they did was they would go walk into a business and they'd say, hey, you know, you need some protection? And then the business owner naturally would be like, no, I'm good. Well, then they'd send a group of goons in like 2 days later to ransack the place. And then the mafia would show back up later and go, hey, I saw you guys got robbed the other day. You need some help? And then the business owner would say, well, yeah. I need some security now. And then they would say, okay, well, you're gonna have to give us 10%. And you know, they'd make the deal just to keep their business open. So that's the kind of things that happened back then. But it also kept cops honest. The cops could not just do whatever they want, because there were repercussions in the street, and the mafia would deal with them. Same thing with when we look at the United States government. The United States government and the mafia were enemies. They were not friends. You know, they were enemies. And so the United States government had a sense of fear for the mafias because you can't control them and they're going to do what they want to do. And they don't care about the feds. So that made the government, instead of being all the way over here with their radical idealizations, they would have stayed closer to the middle because there would have been repercussions for their stepping out of their box. And now the government doesn't have a fear amongst the people. They do fear the MAGA movement. But I don't think they understand what their level of fear for it is yet. However, I believe that if there was still a large organized crime, you know, like in Washington, D.C., in Detroit, in Chicago, in New York, in Miami, in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, I think there's a lot less problems going on because the government's not going to want to go to war. And they know that those groups will go to war. Kansas City, for instance, you know, back in the 80s and 90s had organized crime. Their actual, like, you know, gang violence was down. And it didn't go up until organized crime started, until the Italian mafia started to die out. You know, same thing in New York City. You know, crime was over 3,000 murders a year. Then Giuliani came in and cleaned it up and made deals with the mob and everybody else involved and said, hey, there's too many dead people in the streets. We can't have it. If you want me to back off police presence, you guys sell all, do all your rackets, you're not going to hear from me. But if I keep finding bodies in the streets, I'm gonna turn up on you and I'm gonna wipe you guys out. And they made the deal and it happened and it worked. They went from 3,000 murders a year to a little over 300 a year. It was a humongous, significant thing. They were doing stop and search, on people in the streets. If they were a known convicted felon, they just stop and search them. That worked. But it keeps, when you have a balance of good guy, bad guy, it keeps both sides more honest. There's repercussions, there's consequences. So you have to be a little more strategic with things. Now there's no repercussions for anything. The street gangs are out of control. Everything that the mafia used to do that was illegal is now legal. So there's no real use for them anymore. So then that hurt our street crime problem. And, you couldn't just run around and murder neighborhoods and have shootouts in the streets. There were repercussions for that. There were certain areas that were protected and off limits. And, you had all these things, and pretty soon the whole city's off limits because the Italians owned everything. And, then you go into certain neighborhoods, the Russians owned everything. Go into certain neighborhoods, the Irish owned everything. So there's just areas you just don't screw around in. And I think we lack that today. And I think that we are seeing an imbalance in the city structure because of it. I'm not saying that we need to have these things, in mass or in aggressiveness. But I do think that there needs to be that presence, mainly because it keeps the government honest. If the government has nothing to fear, we're done, because then they can do whatever they want. And that's what they're doing right now. Government doesn't fear anything, so they're going to do whatever they want. We have a lot of cleaning up to do, Americans. There's a lot of cleaning up to. We got to get this cowardly president we have to do something about these stupid protests on these college campuses. Pretty soon, every college, if he doesn't do something, every college campus is going to be protesting across the country. Fact. It's going to be a fact. And then we have a big problem. I just saw a statistic today that the Chinese, just in the last, I think it was month or two, set over 7,000% increase in Chinese nationals coming across the border illegally. We are being infiltrated. We're seeing it with this whole Hamas thing that's going on right now in our country and the pro-Palestinian thing. Pretty soon we're going to have a China problem in our country. Pretty soon we're going to have a cartel problem in our country. So it's a problem, and we need to address it. If our president doesn't address it, we need to get rid of him. He is not strong enough to be our leader. He doesn't have the fortitude. He doesn't have the mental capacity anymore. He just don't have it. The guy can't even walk across the White House lawn anymore. So, agree with me, disagree with me on the organized crime thing. I've done a lot of studies. I could get really in depth in this and explain all the statistics and everything, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave some food for thought. Y'all go research it. Go look into some things and go down that rabbit hole and see how things, were back in the day compared to now, as far as like the crime goes. And today it just seems like it's a free for all. Hell, we have shootouts here in Atlanta on 285 going around the city. They just shoot at each other in the cars. It's out of control, and no neighborhood's safe anymore, and we need to figure that out. And when we go we were watching our Ivy League schools in the most prestigious neighborhoods in America having issues, no neighborhood is safe anymore. So I think it's going to take all Americans to take a stand and tell these kids to go back to class, because our president's not going to do it. The Department of Defense is not going to do it. They should be on the ground on these campuses shutting this down right now, but they're not. The Department of Justice is worthless. The FBI is worthless. They don't want to do nothing. They don't want to do, at least not anything that helps Americans. So, but that is my my show for the day. I look forward to seeing everybody on Sunday. I have a new guest that I'm going to be introducing. I will put a little thing together for that for the Sunday show, so everybody will know, so you can tune in. And I promise you, it's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. It's going to be hard to tell, what kind of crazy topics we're going to bring up. My guest can be a loose cannon at times, so this will be interesting. But she gets it honestly. Oh, sorry, I give you a hint. Dang it. So we have that coming up. I've got some other new guests lined up for the future. I will be on Monday's episode of The Private Room with Tiffany. For those of you at The Private Room with Tiffany, we'll be going live, I believe, at 8 o'clock. Don't quote me on that. On Monday, this coming Monday. So tune in for that. We're going to talk about some things going on in Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, they need it there. They've had a big shooting, with the United States Marshals this week, where a marshal got killed, and it just seems like their crime's spiking a little bit the last few weeks. I've been paying attention. So there's some outreach things that they're working on there in Charlotte to kind of help curtail that. I'm going to tune in. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be guest hosting to see if there's anything that I can pick up from that maybe we can translate down here in Atlanta to maybe make things a little bit better. And, maybe there's something that I can pass on back home, to Ohio, to spread these positive things and try to get our country back on track. We're a little out of control right now. So any little help that we can give each other is going to be valuable help. So everybody, watch your surroundings, know where your kids are at. Be safe out there. Check out. I'm going to be making more YouTube shorts whenever I think of clever things that'll get 50 likes in a short amount of time. But I promise you, we're going to have fun on Sunday. Tune in. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. I'll check you all later.